Hello. Thanks for joining us. Special Report Online. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. If it's your first time aboard, welcome. It's a great forum to continue the conversation with our panel. And we want to hear from you, so weigh in. Type in questions or comments. Don't worry if you don't see them right away. The producers are putting them in as fast as they can. Panel, Jonah, AB, and Matt. You can take a drink. This is online. It's fine.
I needed one the whole show.
Yes. So people are starting to get there. Mike Harmon says Trump's biggest mistake was naming Sessions AG, cost a Senate seat, and resulted in Mueller's witch hunt. Okay. What do you think about that, man?
Boy, Alabama's been a little bit of a wasteland politically for Donald Trump. I think he is awfully disappointed, obviously, to have a special counsel because of these recusals. And it's still shocking that we lost, as a Republican, I say this, that we lost the seat in Alabama. So it's a very fair point.
You know, this seat, AB, is only for 2 years. If Doug Jones wants to get reelected, he's going to have to play Alabama politics,
Absolutely.
isn't he?
He's going to have to vote like Luther Strange and Jeff Sessions did if he wants to hold that seat. And look, there aren't abortion votes every day in the Senate. He's probably going to vote a lot of fiscal issues with Republicans. And I hope the Democrats, know that they need to be big boys and girls and let him, or they're going to be right back where they are, which is powerless with a bunch of liberals in their caucus.
Yeah, but you know what? There's a lot of people out there who say, that makes sense, and on paper that should be true for Joe Manchin and Joe Donnelly of Indiana and Heidi Heitkamp and a couple of others who are up for re-election in red states that Trump won by 80% of the counties or more. But they haven't. They've held the line on a Chuck Schumer, hold the line to not even debate tax reform.
Yeah, it definitely surprised me that so far they've only three of them, Manchin, Donnelly, and Heitkamp, let's give them credit, actually voted to end cloture on the vote for Gorsuch. And they did not sign the letter that Senator Schumer sent around saying these are the stipulations that have to be met on tax reform on the debate. So they have tried to keep some independence, but they have also been able to go home and say we weren't invited to the table on tax reform. It's a partisan process with reconciliation instructions. It doesn't help the middle class. If you look at the polling on tax reform, I think they're pretty happy they weren't involved.
Jonah.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think, though, the idea that Doug Jones can hold on to this seat past the next 2 years is really, really doubtful. That coalition, one of the things that both Doug Jones and Donald Trump had in common was they had opponents who were just toxic to a critical mass of voters. And a normal, conventional, even Luther Strange type Republican candidate, I would be stunned if they couldn't beat Doug Jones in 2018, barring some really strange either conversion by Jones or radical change in our politics. That is such a red state. There's an old rule in politics, which most people don't say anymore, but don't nominate a child molester. And if you don't do that,
it's a big bumper sticker. Campaigns.
But this is an era of back to basics, right? And one of those old rules is don't do that. And if you can do that, avoid doing that, you can probably get a Republican elected in Alabama.
He denies the allegation, we should point out, but it was tough to watch some of those decisions. I mean, in the final days, Roy Moore was interviewed by a 12-year-old girl down there. I mean, it was
quite a picture.
Yeah, that was
quite something.
Yeah, no, it is quite something. And one thing AB said earlier was this idea that Trump is at 48 in Alabama. And I think when people saw that in the exit polling, which is where that came out, they said, well, these exits must be way off. And the exits, well, they were a little off, but they weren't way off. And I think the point is this, which is, if Donald Trump had been on the ballot, there would have been a smashing victory. If Jeff Sessions had been on the ballot, there would have been a smashing victory. Let's face it, even in a red state, if you nominate somebody who is, as you claim, and as the allegations, which are very serious, is a child molester, and who, even when those allegations weren't up, the polls were very tight, even before these charges. And in his last race, he barely won. You can't win them all, and you can't win them with such a bad candidate.
Yeah, and I should just be clear, because I've been on the record about this for a very long time. Conservatives and Republicans should have had nothing to do with him even if these allegations hadn't come out. Yeah.
They stayed home. That's why it's 48-48 in the exit, because a lot of Republicans and conservatives simply said this is too many steps.
Wait, that was not a Moore number. That was a Trump number.
And voted.
That was because it wasn't a proper sample.
Or voted in, and voted for Nick Saban or something.
The concern that Republicans have is not about what the Trump sentiment is in red states. It's in the suburban districts they need to hold on. That's where they're worried about. Judge Jones was totally vanilla last night, just as he was during the campaign. That was why it was a good campaign. He never talked about Donald Trump. And still, what Republicans fear was that there was anti-Trump energy. That's what they're talking about today.
Yeah. I wonder if Trump's agenda was on the ballot and not Roy Moore, what Alabama, how they would vote.
60-30.
I'm with these guys. They would have voted for a Republican.
Yeah.
Look, every poll in Alabama, and don't look at this exit, don't look at the Roy Moore. If you look at just the Trump agenda in Alabama, it's smashingly popular. So the idea that this is a indictment of Trump or the political weakness of Trump is incorrect.
All right, but it is an indictment of Steve Bannon. Here is Josh Holmes' quote to Steve Bannon, former McConnell guy. "It should be a hurricane siren for every Republican. This is what the death of a party looks like. And without an immediate course correction and rejection of the Steve Bannon view of the world, you can lose races in states like Alabama. If I had the top 5 Republican minds in politics and we spent 3 months attempting to conceive of a way to lose an Alabama Senate race, I'm not sure we could come up with it. You could literally take any name out of a phone book except Roy Moore's and win by double digits, and we managed to get the only guy in Alabama that could lose to a Democrat," a former top aide to Mitch McConnell. So Steve Bannon, is he dead in the water for the next political races?
He should be, except there's an enormous interest among a sliver of the GOP base, some donors, and the mainstream media to elevate him into a major force in American politics that I don't think he is. I think he has got the most oversized and undeserved reputation as a grand political strategist of anybody in my adult lifetime. And I basically agree with Holmes about this. And the irony to me that I find so baffling is that he can, and I mentioned this on the show, he goes around talking about how he wants people to vote for his candidates to help the Trump agenda. And yet his candidates are really dangerous to the Trump agenda. And it goes, for example, Rand Paul has done more to undermine Donald Trump's legislative agenda than almost anybody else in the last year. But he praises him verbally, so he's fine. Meanwhile, people like Mitch McConnell and even Corker and Ben Sass, who vote with the Trump administration almost in perfect lockstep, but every now and then they criticize a tweet or something the president says, they are all of a sudden enemy number 1 of Trump Nation. And it's perverse. It should be the other way around. If you help move the ball of his agenda, it shouldn't matter what you say. And it's sort of the mirror image of what Trump does. Trump says all sorts of crazy stuff, but people say, well, don't worry about that. You have to follow his agenda because that's the important thing. Why can't you have that standard for senators? Let them criticize Trump's tweets, but if they vote for tax cuts or if they vote for repealing Obamacare, that should be the metric that they judge against, and they have it flipped upside down.
Sydney just says, is there any credence to the military vote that would impact the election in Alabama? I don't think the votes are there. We've gone over these votes. We made the call last night. It is a narrow margin. Our poll going in, and just to explain this, was 10 points 2 days before the election. It had a plus or minus of 3.5, and there were 10% undecided in that poll. It turned out that the poll was right on who won. The margin is probably going to end up being about 2.
Right. And obviously, those who were undecided didn't pull that lever for Roy Moore. What's interesting is that a lot of us, I would say myself included, thought that Roy Moore might have been very much underperforming in these polls, because who would want to admit they're going to vote for him, even though you might have voted for him because you care about the Supreme Court and you care about other issues in the Trump agenda. So it was amazing that that the race came out as it did. Can I say one other thing, Brett, quickly about what Jonah said about this race? To me, it's very fair to level some criticisms at Steve Bannon, but literally, this is a problem that we had from the very beginning. Josh Holmes, who is a current advisor to Mitch McConnell, kind of helps run his political operation. They've also got to improve their act. They went in there whole hog behind Luther Strange, who is an incumbent, and it's understandable. But Luther Strange was in all kinds of ethical clouds over the whitewashing of the governor's investigation. If there was any candidate, literally, who probably was going to have trouble winning the whole way along, it was Luther Strange. So it's a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black. And
which is why he lost the primary.
That's
largely.
right. It's like afterwards to say, oh my God, how could Steve Bannon possibly pick the candidate who was going to lose when they also picked the candidate who was going to lose, which means the third guy was the obvious right candidate, this House member, this conservative House member from the very beginning. The other two were incredibly weakened, and leave it to our party and our movement to go with the wrong two.
They ended up with the rocking horse behind door number 3.
Yes, they did. The price was wrong.
Can we just
Yes.
put one sort of unifyingly, it would take a heart of stone not to laugh point about all of this? Poor Al Franken is shown the door solely on, not solely, but largely on the cynical play to sort of use Roy Moore as this Medusa's head to sort of say, oh, look how terrible the Republicans are, and use this sort of Me Too stuff against Donald Trump. And then Roy Moore doesn't win. And Franken's still out. And he's still not admitting that he did anything, but he was the scapegoat to make all of this possible on the assumption that Roy Moore was going to get in there. And now he's not in there, and he's
just, I'm having a hard time feeling sorry for him.
I know. That's why I said it takes a heart of stone not to laugh. But still, it's an amazing thing.
But it's not over, that whole line of attack.
Oh, no.
It's just beginning.
But it's more difficult without Roy Moore in there.
Kirsten Gillibrand is, it's going to Me Too all the way through 2018.
The problem is that for the people who are, I'm not discrediting the president's accusers at all, but that because he won,
that line is affected
it's
by the
not
White
something
House.
that can be investigated in Congress.
It's
not going to.
online.
Congress can't investigate this. It has to be handled elsewhere.
Okay, RLM says this horse is dead. Move on to the next subject. Okay, fantastic.
Which horse? The horse Roy Moore was riding on? Or which horse?
The one he rode in on. Okay.
Can I make a clip for that one?
Yeah, maybe. You can make the clip.
Maybe next year.
We're going to wrap up early because there is a holiday party tonight for the Fox D.C. Bureau. New York had theirs the other day, and now we're having it here, which is good. The special report party is next week. Should be fun. For all of those asking about Charles, he is still in the hospital, and he is still recovering. And I'm constantly in contact. I don't know when he's going to be back. I do know he's trying every day to get a step closer to be back on this panel, and we miss his voice. We miss him, and I'll give you updates as soon as I can. But he is still fighting the battle after that original surgery, and it's been a long, tough road to recover. So with that, Special Report Online is going to wrap up for the year. We'll be back in January every Wednesday after the show. Panel, thank you very much. AB got some water. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.